Hi, and welcome back to another installment of Getting to Know You. Today, it is my honor and pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Jeffrey Sugarman. He has received his undergraduate degree from UC Berkeley in neurobiology. He received an NIH medical scientist training grant and completed his MD and PhD in biomedical science at UC San Diego. He went on to complete his training as a pediatric dermatologist, first with a residency in pediatrics at the University of Washington Children's Hospital in Seattle, and then a dermatology residency at UC San Francisco. He is boarded in dermatology and in pediatric dermatology and is currently clinical professor in dermatology at UC San Francisco, as well as in private practice as the medical director of Redwood Family Dermatology in Sonoma County. He is a founding member of PeDRA and the immediate past president for the Society for Pediatric Dermatology. It is an honor to have you with me today, Dr. Sugarman.
Thank you so much for having me.
So as we get started, I'm hoping that you might be able to give everybody some background about you, how and why you decided pediatric dermatology was the right fit for you.
Well, during medical school, I really became attracted to the field of pediatrics, and dermatology was not really on my radar back then. I just really wanted to take care of kids, and I remember trying to learn everything I could even back in medical school, and wound up starting a pediatric dermatology rotation at UC San Diego. In fact, Larry Eichenfield and Sheila Friedlander were there back then, and they agreed to allow me to rotate as a medical student. They had never had one before. And that was a really exciting month for me and my first introduction to pediatric dermatology. I still didn't really know that I could be a pediatric dermatologist back then. There was no fellowship in pediatric dermatology, and I went off to Seattle to do my pediatrics residency and thought I would be a pediatric immunologist or maybe a pediatric rheumatologist. And my very first year, I did an elective in pediatric immunology, and there was immunology and infectious disease. And there was a lot of overlap that month with derm. And I just fell in love with derm and realized that a 3-year residency in derm after a 3-year residency in pediatrics was really the same amount of time as doing a fellowship in pretty much any subspecialty in peds. And so I realized, well, that was what I wanted to do. And the hard part was applying and getting in, but luckily I matched my first choice at UCSF and started my derm residency there.
And then how did you find your way to research?
Well, I've been interested and involved in research from the very beginning. I was fortunate enough to get an NIH training grant, and I was in one of the early MSTP programs. And so I got a PhD and an MD at UC San Diego. And so my whole academic grooming was really for being a physician scientist.
Mm-hmm. What areas do you like to focus on for research?
Well, I've been interested in a long time in atopic dermatitis, and I've been interested in genetic skin disease, in particular, mosaic genetic skin disease. It's funny how things just happen to you and sort of shape your trajectory, but I was asked to write a book chapter by Ilona Frieden when I was in my second year of derm residency at UCSF. And the topic was epidermal nevus syndrome. And I just became fascinated with that disease area. And that really sparked my interest in genetic skin disease. And I've been working on that ever since.
And how has research changed in those areas throughout your career?
Well, we just know so much more now. I mean, we have so much more granularity about genotype-phenotype correlation. Back in the 1990s and early 2000s, only a handful of genes were really characterized that were responsible for this phenotypic expression of genetic skin disease. And so we did a lot of guessing, and we looked carefully at clinical features and try to group things and separate things on those bases. But as sequencing technology became so much faster and so much cheaper and more accessible, we were able to really figure out what those mutations were. And that just gave us so much more insight into the genetic causes of those diseases and how the genes and the clinical features related to one another.
And what were the implications of those revelations for patients?
Well, that's ongoing. I mean, I think initially the implications were really more for physicians, and it helped us understand the diseases we were treating. For example, in epidermal nevus syndrome, we came to realize that the two big categories, nevus sebaceous and keratinocytic epidermal nevus, were actually caused by the same mutation, but phenotypically look different depending on how much relative sebaceous material was involved. Either that was because it was in a area of the body with a large density of sebaceous glands, or for whatever reason, the mutations just affected sebaceous growth more than keratinocyte growth. But it was quite an amazing discovery to realize that for most cases, not all, the very same mutations were responsible. For that particular disease, the effects on patient care have lagged, because even though we know the genetics, we still don't have a smart treatment for RAS mutations. I'm sure it's coming. But for other diseases, once we understand the genotype, then developing targeted therapies around that just makes more sense and is more doable.
I want to come back to that and what the implications are for patients, as it's, not quite been realized yet. But firstly, I want to talk a little bit about what it was like being a founding member of PeDRA, and what were the driving factors for getting this type of organization together and off the ground?
Well, it had been sort of in the works for a number of years before PeDRA was actually formed. Myself, Amy Paller, and a number of others within the SPD realized that for our field really to advance into the 21st century, we needed a very robust research arm and folks that were in our society and outside that were committed to research in pediatric dermatology. That's really how the field is moving forward and how it has to move forward. For decades, most of our research was clinical observational study, with some exceptions, but we saw the importance of developing a much more systematic way to do research in our field to move our field forward. And that started with research symposia at the SPD meeting. In fact, I was the first organizer, along with Amy Paller, of those research forums, and we did 3, 4 in a row right leading up to the foundation of PeDRA. And so those were sort of the antecedent steps that were taken, and then a small group of us formed PeDRA. There's a funny slide of us sitting in a whiteboard trying to figure out what that acronym should be. And I think Larry was the one who finally put all the letters together, and he left the room and the picture was taken without him.
Oh, no.
So if we ever do show that, we've got to Photoshop him in, because he was
we'll
obviously a really integral part in that.
Yeah.
And I served on PeDRA's executive board for 3 or 4 years, from its onset to just a couple years ago, I stepped off.
Yeah. I mean, the organization owes a major debt of gratitude to you and our other founding members for getting this incredible work off the ground and getting the network organized. It's really, just even in my 4 short years with the organization, I have seen a lot of change and a lot of growth and a lot of research that is
Yes.
really doing it's achieving a great impact for our patients. And it's really exciting to kind of watch that in real time.
Yes, absolutely. There's so much excitement and energy, especially from the younger investigators. It's just thrilling to see.
It really is. And I love that you guys, as the founding members, really um, founded the network with the idea that it was paramount to make sure that early investigators had a place to call home within this network and to
Mhm.
nurture their research skills and to help them grow into like full-fledged principal investigators and leading research projects.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of PeDRA's most powerful tools, is having this mentorship groundwork for all of our early investigators.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And that's where our future is. That's where our energy is. And, I participate in a lot of different organizations, and I've really not encountered one that has so much energy and enthusiasm and work ethic among young people, young physicians and young investigators. So it's just great to see. And it's really makes me proud, and it makes me really excited about the future.
And speaking of future, where do you see research in the next 5 to 10 years? And what's PeDRA's role in that research?
Well, I felt this way for quite a few years. I really feel that we've got a lot of pieces that are working great in PeDRA right now. We've got really fine clinicians. I mean, the
Mhm.
best of the best. And what we're working on is bringing the scientific part, the research, the basic research part, up to that same level. And a lot of our superb clinicians simply just don't have the research training
Mhm.
that somebody might have that went through a PhD program, for example,
Mhm.
or did a postdoc. And so while more and more of our members are coming with research experience, we still want to give opportunities for the younger members and mid-career members who maybe don't have that same formal training
Mhm.
to be able to either get that formal training or to collaborate on, doing translational research with basic scientists. And so I think that the way I envision PeDRA's future is more collaboration with basic scientists who may actually have research questions that you might not think directly relate to pediatric dermatology, but they might be studying endothelial cells, and there
Mhm.
could be an amazing partnership with PeDRA members who are interested in hemangioma pathogenesis. And to really get to that next step, we're collaborating with basic scientists that are studying endothelial cells that maybe never even knew that pediatric dermatology existed as a field. And there's so many little synergies like that.
Mhm.
So I think I would like to see PeDRA cast its net wider in
Mhm.
terms of collaboration um, with basic scientists and bringing them into the PeDRA fold.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I think PeDRA has proven that it takes a village to be successful in research, and we can only expect to be even more successful if we bring others into that village that we haven't worked with before. And so many of our investigators can benefit from working with those basic scientists, as you said, and the synergies really do make a lot of sense that we would be
Yeah.
working together. Absolutely. So one thing, and now this will be our last question before I let
Okay.
you go. Um, you've had a very long and prolific career, and you are a luminary in the field and a very important leader. But I also know you have a family. So I wondered if you could impart some wisdom on what it means to you to have work-life balance and how you've achieved that.
Well, that's a big question. And just when I think things are in balance, I turn the corner and things are out of balance again. So it's not one thing, but it's a mindset that you have
Mhm.
to really work on that, because it's not going to just happen.
Mhm.
Um, I did things a little differently than most people. I decided not to have a career in traditional academia.
Mhm.
And although I've kept the hours of a traditional academic and made time force myself to schedule in research, writing, teaching. I think the problems that people have that are doing a traditional academic career is that there are just so many constraints on your time that it's just hard to protect yourself. And so my advice would be to try to protect your, limit the amount of clinical responsibility that you have signed up for. So you have more time to do your research and more flexible time for family and things outside of academics. For me, it was a little bit of the opposite. I had a busy private practice that I was running, and lots and lots of moving parts. I had to schedule in research time and to make sure that I was still living up to what I wanted to live up to. And I think that's a really viable way to go about having an academic career, but you have to really actively work hard to do that. And then, so what I've done in the last 5 to 8 years is I've really tried to limit my clinical time. So I have more time for the questions that I really want to address and answer, and more time, more flex time for myself and my hobbies and for my family.
So, yep, work-life balance is really just an evolution, and it changes,
Yeah.
and it's something, like you mentioned, you just have to really work at it
Every day.
every
Yeah.
day. Absolutely. Thank you so much for being with me today on Getting to Know You, Dr. Sugarman. It has been a
Thank you.
pleasure talking with you.
It's really my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
A big thank you to Dr. Sugarman for joining me today. I hope that you enjoyed this episode. You can enjoy more episodes by checking us out in the PeDRA app. If you don't have that app yet, you can go to Google Play or iTunes and download PeDRA. You can also find more of us online at www.pedraresearch.org, and you can find us on Twitter at PeDRA Research.